if I got a report back that said my third grader was proficient in reading, I would think that they could read at a third grade level. And there's many tests that show what that means. So help me here.
So I think your question was, could the standards in one state be different than the other? And they could be. And actually, if you go to different materials that say this is third grade reading, it might depend on that publisher's determination. So someone sets a standard, whether it be a publisher who publishes a test, whether it be a state who sets some standards and then sets cut scores to go with those. The answer is yes, you could get different performances of being on third grade in different states. You could get it in different countries. And if there's no statewide standard of some level, you get it different in different districts.
Right, so there is a national standard because we've talked about the NAEP before. So would this not be a better reason for using a national type test, especially since we have a lot of military students here, so that when we're measuring it with others so that we actually, parents know whether or not how they stack up against those of the same age or grade? I would hope the answer is yes.
Well, it depends on what you're trying to determine. If you want to know how our students do compared to students in another state, you've got to figure out what would be the national test that would do that.
No, let me clarify. What I want to know is, and this has been my frustration, Madam Chair, one is that we just changed our standards, which you're telling me now, even if I change my standards, my third graders still may not be able to read at what we would all know as a third grade level, fourth grade level, fifth grade, because our standards may not measure in the same fashion. So we've spent money on new curriculum, we have new standards, we're going to have new testing. We didn't meet the old standards, the old testing, which was lower. So I'm just trying to figure out how we make sure that parents know that when they get these tests back, that their child is where they need to be. I mean, I think that's what everybody hopes to know that. So I'm just trying to figure out, maybe I should be asking about the new test and the new standards. Will we know that if we say that they're proficient in reading here, whatever grade you want to use for math, that will pretty much be the same as in other states? Or we're still not going to know?
It depends on how we set the cut scores, which determine what proficiency is. And I think the State Board has a strong interest in making sure that at the end of the day, when we have some cut scores, we'll be able to say, here's how our students do relative to other states. There are a large number of other states that are using similar tests called consortium products. I think many of the task force members are aware of that. One of those groups has set their cut scores, and we'll be able to analyze that process of how they went through to set those cut scores before we do ours. If the State Board decides to align our system to how those other states did, that may be able to give us a clearer picture of how we're doing relative to other states. I think we understand that's a strong interest. It's certainly what one reason to look at some of those assessments, but you can't just pull any assessment that is national or that is used in multiple states and assume it will give you that information. It's about how the cut score is established on that test.
So, Madam Chair, I think we need to look into and maybe pass it on to the education chairman that so that it doesn't happen like it did in the past where the cut scores kept getting lower and lower and lower to where we honestly don't even know at this point whether our third graders can read, and even if they are proficient, all we're doing is less of them are becoming proficient in most of these areas. But I think maybe the legislature needs to set the cut scores instead of letting the board to make sure it doesn't keep going down just so we could show something being true when in fact it's not. I'm really disappointed because I thought we had this cleared up.
Thank you, Representative Wilson, and I know that our aide is in the back writing that down to make sure that we get that to the education committees, both on the Senate and the House side. Excuse me, Mr. Neese.
I just thank you for having the information, and I like the fact that you go back 4 years. Our SBAs have been here for 10 years. So just understanding a third grader in 2010 that's proficient can be expected to be a seventh grader in 2014. So if you had 7,000 of them, 7,700 of them proficient in the third grade, then having 7,800 of them pretty much says that your system's working because you have more proficient than were proficient before.
You didn't change the scores.
So in that period of time, if you're trying to look at it longitudinally, have you changed the scores where you can actually make that comparison? I mean, if you're a proficient third grader and a proficient seventh grader, is it because of the way you've set the cut scores, or is it because you have actually had kids benefiting from good teachers, doing well and succeeding, or maybe the smart kids moved in and the dumb kids moved out, or is there some kind of factor I don't understand in this? Is it because of the way you've set the cut scores, or is it possible to look at this? Because when I was looking at it, I was looking at the big 5 districts because Anchorage jumped in front 2 years ago and adopted Common Core, and there's a lot of controversy with that. And I thought, okay, we were told by Commissioner Hanley that Common Core is the next best thing coming around the corner. And I went, okay, well, they've had 2 years of running that. They should be, like, doing great compared to the schools that are not Common Core. And in every single area on longitudinal kids, they are behind in third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, and 10th, with the exception of fifth grade, which for some reason was a miraculous grade level for everybody. They just all went proficient. So I just need to know, is it a data set that has to do with the way you set the cut scores, or is it a mark we can count on in that when you say a third grader is proficient, they're reading within 2 months of 3.0. I mean, when I was a kid, a long time ago, we got a little thing back from the state that said, your child's reading at 7th grade, 2nd month. Your child's reading at 5th grade, 3rd month. Your 5th grader's reading at 4th grade, 2. He might need a little help. None of our cut scores, nothing in this SBA, nothing in the Common Core I see coming out, has that simple reference mark for parents. You want your parents in this, you've got to give them accurate information. So is the cut scores working in the way they're designed to, where proficiency variances over the course of the 4 years you've got in here, 5 years you've got in here, are due to actual good comparative data, or is it just a variation due to the way the board sets the cut scores? Not the way the testing company set it, but because you said the board sets the test score. Sorry, big, long question. I might have a follow-up.
I'll attempt to answer the question. First off, I do want to be clear. The board sets these cut scores. This is a state test. But if you're using something like the Terra Nova assessment, there aren't cut scores. They're percentile ranks, and those percentile ranks are established through a system with the publisher using statistics. And if they ever mark that against a reading score, generally those publishers are marking it against reading scores of materials that they sell at the 3rd grade. So if they tell you someone's at the 3rd grade level, it's because they can read the 3rd grade materials that publisher also sells. Different than this assessment. So this assessment, the cut scores are set within each grade. So the 3rd grade cut scores are set by determining what assessment items would a student have to get right to prove they knew these standards at the 3rd grade level. And then the cut score is established at that grade level. Those people that are working to set those cut scores look at the adjacent grade levels to make sure that there isn't great variability in terms of how students would do on 3rd grade if they moved up to 4th grade. However, they also take into account that in 4th grade, these students are going to learn some new, challenging, complex things. And so you can reasonably have a student that is proficient if they're just barely